Hello and welcome to the State of Events, where event professionals connect. The following is the Session 1 audio recording of our webinar series, Normalizing Mental Health, Resources to Create Dialogue and Break the Stigma. TESO and its members are not medical doctors. We are just providing a space to create dialogue around mental health awareness. Most of our panelists are either from the medical field, in executive leadership, and in some cases, certified in their industry. However, TESO does not represent any medical board, nor are we members of any medical associations.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. It's a beautiful, cloudy day here in Los Angeles today. I'm Cara. I'll be co-hosting with Sonia today. I will also be handling any registration and attendee issues as well. So if you know anyone that's having a hard time having access to our webinar today, just go ahead and chat me. I'll be more than happy to assist you. And also, I just want to remind everyone that this is a safe space for us to gain resources and be vulnerable in a protected environment. So please refrain from diagnosing or giving your opinion to others in the chat. You are free to offer support and empathize, but leave therapeutic advising to our panelists. I'll toss our next chat moderating housekeeping to Karen.
Hey everyone, good morning or good evening, depending on where you're at. My name is Karen. I am your happy, friendly chat moderator today. And so we're gonna have a lot of fun engaging in the chat. So please drop comments, like Cara was saying, cheer people on. Just feel free to give comments. We really want to engage with you today. Also as well, we're gonna have fun. So, I'll probably put some cool quotes from all these wise people here. And also as well, as we get toward the end of our panel discussion, we will be doing a Q&A. So feel free to drop any questions you may have in the chat. And yeah, I will go ahead and, oh, by the way, also, if we don't get to your question, it isn't that we don't love you. It's just because maybe we ran out of time. So I will just, right back to Sonia.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen. All right. Well, without further ado, I'm going to do a small introduction of who we have joining us today to talk about normalizing mental health boundaries and healthy living. First up, we have Megan Ceja. Megan is she's a school psychologist at the UCLA Lab School, and that is a laboratory school that's part of UCLA's graduate program, the School of Education and Information Studies. Welcome, Megan.
Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm so looking forward to our dialogue today.
Awesome. Next on the panel, we have Hwang, or is it Hwang? I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. There we go. Eugen is a professional actor based in London and Singapore who is an educator and coach, and he creates an inner life practice, which is a practical self-care methodology focused on developing and nurturing sustainability in a performing arts career. Welcome, Eugen.
Thank you very much, Sonia, and the team for having me today. Thank you.
And last but not least, we have dear friends of mine, Wendy and Chris Chouteau. Welcome. Chris has actually been in the wellness industry for over a decade. He and his wife, Wendy, started Custom Body Boot Camp over 6 years ago, right here in Los Angeles. Yes, it did. And became one of the most sought after personal training centers in the LA area. Chris holds several fitness and nutrition certifications, and he and Wendy believe that family is what really matters. Taking care of your family and children requires vital energy. Come on, amen to that.
We're excited to be here. Thank you guys for having us, and look forward to getting into this.
Yes.
All right. So first question up, Megan, I would love to start with you and just talk a little bit about the words mental health. When you hear that, what does that either mean to you or maybe a definition that comes to your mind?
Sure. It's a great question. I think mental health is this very broad term of how we take care of our mind, our heart, our spirit. Right? It is the way that I see, and I'm glad our society is moving that way, is that we have physical health and then we have mental health, and that we really need to put all of the emphasis that we do for our physical health to the same, either give the same priority or the same emphasis that we do in mental health. Mental health is really taking care of our internal feelings, our internal thoughts, our internal spirit. And depending on whether you practice certain religious practices or not, taking care of that spirit and this what comes with taking care of your spirit in different ways. For me, mental health, I come from a lens of working with younger children, school-age children, and supporting that age group and also supporting families. And so what I always tell kiddos, school-age kids, when they ask me, what is mental health or what is it that you do? I always say, well, we all have mental health. Everyone has mental health. Just like you have your own physical health. How do you feel today? Does your body feel okay? Do you feel well? Do you feel healthy today? So how's your mental health today? And they usually will give me a stare. What do you mean by that? How are you feeling? How are your emotions today? Do you feel like today has been a good day? So that's really how I define mental health, is really how do we feel inside? What is that internal kind of thermometer, if you will, of our mood, our emotions, our spirit?
Eugen, same question. What would be either your definition of mental health, or what do those words mean for you?
I'm in full agreement of everything that Megan says, and just to sort of add to that, from my perspective, I work primarily in the performing arts education, sort of at higher sort of university conservatoire level, and mental health for me is about that connection between your sort of external world and your internal world, and having them sort of be much more integrated. We sort of think of them historically as two separate things, but we all know now that, for example, if I use an example as an actor, right, I could be a brilliant actor, I could be a brilliant dancer, I could be all of those brilliant things. But if I'm racked with doubt or insecurity, I'm not going to be able to show up. Everything's going to be just completely disconnected. And mental health for me is sort of, it's this sort of holistic approach to your health. It's not just traditionally what we think of, which is just exercise or just eating well. It's everything. And for different people, that's going to encompass different facets depending on what they have in their life. So that for me is mental health.
I love that. Wendy and Chris, I love how, again, how the diversity that's on our panel in terms of this mind, body, and soul is already presented here with your contributions. From your standpoint, and Chris, I've read up a lot on what you've been doing lately, just in creating your own awareness with your platform and with your community. But same question, how do you view mental health from your perspective?
Well, I think mental health it's kind of like, even though we focus on body and getting nutrition and everything in order, I think mental health is the most important part. I think we all want to have a great quality, healthy life and feel good and have that good mental space to just have a great life. And I think it's just perspective. And I think it's the most important part, with what we do and what we teach. I mean, that's kind of what we're gearing people to, kind of empower them and just give them the ability to have control in their life versus being confused and not knowing what to do, and just have more certainty for that. So it's I think it's the most important part for sure.
From what we teach our clients also, another big factor is, at least that I've learned for myself, is as a mom, is finally saying yes to myself, right? Because as with my children, they're little, they needed all the time. And I just never gave myself the opportunity to do things for myself until I shift my mindset, until I said, I need a break. I need to do this for mommy, because if mommy's not good mentally, physically, and emotionally, then I'm not going to be a good mom for you guys. So I think it's all just well-rounded in everything, right? And everything we do, especially for me as a mom.
That's such a great segue, Wendy, because I want to shift into sort of this boundaries concentration today. But in the kind of work that all of you do, how would you explain the concept of boundaries to someone? And Wendy, for sure, not only as you wear the fitness hat and nutrition hat, but wearing that mom hat as well. How have you just regarded this concept of boundaries?
I would define boundaries as those limits that we set for ourselves and sometimes for others, right? It's really giving ourselves agency and empowerment. It could be in a moment, in a moment, or it could be in a period of time. And setting these boundaries and limits could be as small as, not answering, like your boss's calls past a certain amount of time that you are expected to work. Let's say if you have a traditional work hour, to as more complex as not spending time with a certain family member during the holidays because you notice that causes more stress or conflict for yourself or your family. So it's really about being aware, self-aware, I think is the first step to setting boundaries, realizing, gosh, right after I talk to this person, or gosh, right after I take this approach, I feel stressed or I feel anxiety or I can't sleep that night. Just being aware of what your body does, not only physically, because we know the mental and the physical are connected, and then taking a step back and deciding what was it that day or that week that happened that made me act like that or feel that way, then I'm going to set a boundary about that. Right. And I think, the pandemic has done this for families, right? Those boundaries were just blurred because the classroom was home. Parents were not only the teacher, they were the nanny, they were the mom, they were the tutor. All of these hats got put on families and mothers. I don't want to, I don't want to dodge fathers, but we know, there's been some work around mothers during the pandemic, and they've been taking on so much of this role. And so I'm glad to hear, and it just music to my ears, Wendy, to hear that you've started to just really set those boundaries, not only for yourself, but for your children. And I think that's a healthy conversation to start at an early age. I work with families a lot, and when I consult in this kind of theme, I always tell families it's never too early to have that conversation with your kiddo, saying, I'm not ready right now. I need a break from you. Like, mommy's not ready. Daddy's not in a space right now. I'll be back. 2 minutes could be the most that you take for yourself. But even those 2 minutes start to teach our young children that we all need to set boundaries, including my mom and my dad, who I think are always going to be there and always have space for me. But that's not the case. We also need to take care of ourselves.
I love the freedom that I'm feeling and experiencing with being able to hear, from a professional's perspective, that like those words actually are empowering to your children. They actually help the dynamic of the family. I think that there's so many times often that a parent will maybe have to weigh that understanding, like, is this going to be damaging to my child, or do I really need to, establish those lines? And so I just appreciate that perspective being validated. Eugen, from your perspective, what is your concept or your thoughts around boundaries and mental health?
Boundaries for me, from the perspective of mental health, is the awareness of what modern society places upon us and has placed on us, sort of depending on where we come from, where we were born, our jobs, our responsibilities, our ethnicity, our sex, age, social status, for example, and how we have internalized those boundaries, which affect really our view of the world emotionally, spiritually, sort of intellectually, and even physically, and how we a lot of times are not aware of the boundaries that have been set on us because we grew up with them, and we see the world through this lens, and we think that these boundaries are immutable. And so that for me is, especially coming into an industry or a profession that traditionally, and I'm generalizing here, sits on the fringe of what society views as, part of sort of society. It's been a very sort of interesting journey to view this profession from that perspective, and what the world says about this industry and what we want it to be.
Career boundaries are real.
I think boundaries they're a must. So it's like, I think if, in regards to mental health in particular, because I mean, that's one of the things, like getting my clients to set their own boundaries for themselves to be healthy, like all around. I think you have to do it. And I think Megan had mentioned before, where it's like, you can't, like, I think it always comes down to energy, and you have to be in control of that. Like, it's like, and I'm personally one, over in my life now, it's like, I will not be around anybody who takes my energy and just takes away my that energy, that feeling good feeling, because you can feel sometimes, and I know, like, I'll take responsibility for it always, because I know that if my energy is being drained because I'm somehow allowing that to happen, that's things I got to work on. But it's like, there's just certain circumstances where I just won't be around people, and it's like, you have to set up limits like that. It's my belief that health is the most important thing, like, for every individual. So when somebody comes to me, my goal is always to help that person get healthy, and it's all around. But it's like, we've got to set limits. We got to set limits with the food. You got to set limits with friends, family, and you have to figure out, there's ways of communicating and all kinds of solutions to how you do it. But it's like, I think it's super important to make sure we're setting limits.
And I just want to add that he definitely talks the talk and walks the walk, because I wrote a post about this on how he was my hero. Because when I just had given birth, he would say, I'm going out for a run, or I'm going out for a bike ride, or, oh, I need to eat this, I can't have that because it's not in my meals. And internally, I was getting angry, right? Like, how are you going to go run where I have to feed our child, take care of our child, do all these things for our child? So internally, I was getting angry. But it's not until I realized, oh, I know what you're doing. You're taking care of yourself, right? Like, I get it, right? And so in my post, I wrote how he was my hero, because I was able to see that. And then that's when everything just shifted, where, here's a baby, I got to go for a run, right? Here's a baby, I got to go do this for myself, take time for myself. And so I think it's really important to set boundaries. And once you get there, and once that, I think that shift needs to be created for you to actually see it and feel it internally, where you believe it.
Y'all dropping these knowledge balls and I can't keep track.
I know. I gave up on writing my notes, because I was like,
I can't write this.
This is recorded.
Oh, I'm gonna replay this. Wow. We've kind of touched on this in our responses, but I kind of want to go into this a little bit deeper in discussing mental health. What are some pitfalls that you've noticed in guiding people that they fall into, whether they are not aware of them, or maybe they just don't know how to establish boundaries? What are some of those? And, of course, everything's in discretion with using examples, but please, if there are some real life examples that you have on where you were able to notice, that's where this is actually going to not serve you well.
I noticed that there's usually two reasons why an individual or family might struggle with setting boundaries. One is that it's like a learned behavior, right? It's an environmental reason, right? I'll give you an example. You have a hard time setting boundaries, let's say within your work hour schedule, because you had a boss that never set good boundaries. And so that's just the environment that you were in. And you just think that that's healthy, that I can pick up the phone at 10 p.m. if my boss calls, because, that's what my other boss did. And so now I'm the boss. And so then I feel that I can call my employees at that time too, right? It's like this learned environmental cycle that it's not malicious. It's just that we just learn that that's the way that we have held boundaries for ourselves, right? The other part of it, I would say, is it does come down sometimes to personality traits. And what I mean by this is that we all know, and there's probably some of us on this call and the panel that are just yes people. And that's hard. I think that setting boundaries for that kind of personality is tricky because that person tends to think that it's somehow they're going to disappoint somebody if they don't say yes to this, or if they don't go do this, or if they don't take up this extra commitment, or if they don't, go on this whatever event or trip, right? And what I say to families that I'm working through this kind of pitfall is you need to think about when and how are you going to be your best self. And that comes first, even the best self for that person that may be asking for something that you don't have any more juice left, right?
Eugen, I think you probably have an interesting job. You've got to handle all of us crazy actors, us band of misfits. I'm sure you have a great box of colored crayons to paint your world.
I mean, it's a whole spectrum. Really, it's a whole spectrum. And I just want to build off what Megan had said in terms of sort of learned behaviors, right? Because we've learned them, we a lot of us don't necessarily have a very proactive relationship with these boundaries. We just kind of assume that they are there. I mean, how many times, do we hear people say, "Oh, but I didn't have a choice. I had no choice," But we do have a choice. I mean, it's there's a consequence, but there's always a choice, And the second point is we don't know how to challenge these boundaries in a healthy way. We assume they're either black or white, and we tag on so many things to the choice that we make. Our self-worth, our relationships with our families, our careers. We tag on so much of that weight to every sort of single decision. And because we lack that awareness of our personal boundary, we don't sometimes really know how they stack up with what society says boundaries are. Sometimes we might feel very strongly about this, or not. And we really struggle with sort of how do we fit our life into sort of that, and that creates a lot of stress for individuals. And finally, the assumption that just everybody's boundaries are the same as ours. We view world, through, we grow up at, we naturally make the assumption that everyone is like us or grew up like us and has the same worldview as us. And that can be a huge shock when we realize that we don't, and that I work primarily in performing arts. Yes. There are a lot of people that want to challenge boundaries, challenge the status quo. Why are things this way? That's great. That fervor and that enthusiasm is great. It's kind of the follow-up, and it's sort of the why are they doing it? So it's not about doing art for art's sake. It's not about opposing somebody for the sake of opposing them. You have to stand for something. You can't stand against something, because that's a very, very flimsy platform.
Flimsy platform. That is a hashtag right there. Oh gosh, yes, it's not gonna be sturdy. It's not. Thank you for that. Wendy and Chris, some of the pitfalls that you've noticed with the people that you serve.
Like, as far as the pitfalls, is like setting a boundary and making sure you stick to it. Because I think what happens a lot of times is we're creating a change. We know we need, and sometimes we are aware. So it's like, I guess we know when we need to set a new boundary. It's like sticking to it. That's going to be a challenge in itself. So it's like that kind of be one of the pitfalls that we work on, as far as how do we develop the ability to stay true to the boundary that we're setting. And I think a lot of times that's just something that needs to be developed. So I think and I think there's just a lot of different scenarios, but I think that's one of the big ones, just being aware, hey, I'm going to set a boundary, but just understand there is going to be consequence. Like he had said, there is going to be a consequence to whenever we create a change. And so we set up a boundary, there's a consequence to that change, even though it might be positive for us, it might be a negative for somebody else. But this is when it comes to our own mental health and our changes, we have to stay true to ourselves. And the consequence that happens, either the people on the outside are either going to adapt or you move on. There's different scenarios that can happen there, but that's one of the things of there will be a consequence. Just be aware of it And then and it just depends. I mean, I guess the scenario can always be different, but it's like, what is the solution, like, or what is the outcome that you want to create out of that? Like when what we do a lot of times, like when you have relationships with friends and food and this and that, you're going out and you're eating and you're drinking, maybe doing all these habits and patterns. When you decide like, hey, I'm going to be healthy, I am going to either stop this or reduce this for a period of time, that creates resistance from the outside. Some of those people on the outside might not accept that. So then this person over here who's setting this boundary has a decision to make, like, hey, am I going to give in and not be true to myself? Or am I going to stay true to myself and just be okay, like this relationship might come to an end?
For an example, from our point of view, is where we've had a client who's a marathon runner, very social, every weekend, was always out and about. And it's not until we said, hey, you know, like, you really want to reach these goals, you want these goals, you know, your social life, you can still go out, but just make sure you plan accordingly, right? And it's not until she was like, yeah. It's not until she finally did it where she started seeing the change in her body, started noticing things differently, where, and that's when she learned, like, it's not a forever thing, but I do need to set boundaries. I'm not going to be socialized. Well, I can go socialize, but I'm not going to eat, you know, the tapas or everything that comes with the social gatherings of the weekend, right? Because she was on point Monday through Friday or Monday through Thursday. Become the weekend, it was over. But it's not until she realized, at least from our clients' perspective, it's not until they realize that shift and they start seeing the results where they're like, oh, these boundaries do work, and these are the boundaries that I need to step forward if I want to reach these, you know, my ultimate goals with fitness and health and nutrition.
I've heard someone say before, if you don't have the person in your life that is your naysayer, and not in any way shaming you, not condemning you, not in that way, but that's just not going to co-sign everything you say. If you don't have that person in your life, we need to reevaluate our friendships, because you need to be able to have that person that is going to say and call you out and say, yeah, that's not cool, dude. That's not cool, chick. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. And because too, like, those, your safe people, they see you every single day and they see how you do life and they see it from an outside point of view. Sometimes when you're in it and you're doing what you're doing, it's hard to see your patterns, and they see that, hey, you're struggling. And if you don't see those people that will tell you, like, hey, have you taken a rest this week? Or like, have you taken a rest day yet? Yeah, you need those people for sure. Sonia.
Cara is my person. She'd be like, excuse me, what number cup of coffee is that? Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I know that we are moving so quickly along here. I want to address some of the other things, but I think we can kind of like break it up just a bit. Karen, do we have any questions that came in? Just some sort of off the script type of questions or comments that have come into the chat? I want to engage.
Not yet. And I was going to remind everyone, please feel free to, even right now, since we have, go ahead and drop your questions in. Any kind of question, it's totally fine.
And a question that really sort of helped me make the shift from the corporate world into the world that I live in now was a question that asked me, which is, if you had no one to be, nothing to prove, and nothing to fix, where would you spend your life's energy? So if you had no one to be, means, you know, we live in society, we are father, mother, son, brother, you know, all the roles that we play. If you had no one to be, if you took away all of that, if you had nothing to prove, the society that we live in is all about success and results and constant proving yourself and moving up the ladder. If you had none of that, and if you had nothing to fix, and so much, all of us carry burdens and all these sorts of things, right? And a lot of us do fundamentally grow up thinking, well, I did for a long time, thinking that I was broken or there was something fundamentally wrong with me. If we could address all of that, if we could really take all of that away, where would you spend your life's energy? I mean, that question was asked to me probably 12 years ago, and I'm still I still work through that question. And it's a question that I constantly ask myself because it's a grounding question for me in terms of what I need and where I make the daily choices, the big changes that everyone here talks about making, lifestyle changes, health changes, career changes, all of that. The big decisions are easy to make. It's the everyday decisions that you make. Do I eat this? Do I go for this? Or do I go for that? Do I study this? Or, do I work on this? Or do I not work on this? That's the work that is done. That's where the work is, where you build the kind of momentum that you want. You reap what you sow, in essence. So how do you ask that question of yourself every day?
Wow.
It's such a great question, Eugen. And I would say that, on the topic of mental health, I mean, millions of people across the world, are suffering from anxiety, suffering from depression, suffering from all sorts of mental health challenges. And some of the first steps that, a mental health provider or mental health support tells people that are suffering is, ask yourself first, what brings you happiness? What brings you joy? It seems as simple as that. And how can we build on that? And that includes setting boundaries. That includes having accessibility to whatever that thing might be. But that question takes a lot of insight, takes a lot of time, takes a lot of processing. I mean, it's not something that you can just answer one day and say, okay, that's what it is. And it shifts too as stages of our life shift, right? From adolescence to early adulthood to motherhood to professionals, and so I think it's such a great question, Eugene, that you're posing, and I think it is an important one that we need to do more, take more time to really ask ourselves those questions, especially in moments where we feel like our mental health is taxing us.
How are you working to bring awareness? How are you, and even in our society, how are you bringing awareness to the things that you've noticed we are truly struggling with as a society, maybe even right now, or maybe even since the pandemic has begun?
There's a few things I would probably say. I'll start with, what I do now currently. I work with school age children, and I work with teachers. And I think it does start there. It starts very early in life that we put an emphasis on mental health. I mean, I remember when I went to school, there was no talk about anything. It was just math, reading, and writing. And that was the extent of what I was taught in school. And therefore, that's what I thought I needed to prioritize, right? Those are the messages that I was getting from the adults in my life, including my teachers, including family members, things like that. So the work that I do a lot now, in not only here at the lab school, but in other places and other, I consult with other teachers outside of where I work, is how do we start early of asking students very basic questions. How are you today? No, really, how are you? And not just I'm good, because you'll get that from school age kids. You'll get it. It's fine. I'm happy. But no, how do we start really infusing a lot of emotional language at a very early age? Teaching children disappointment, teaching children what is frustration, teaching children what does it mean to be envious. I mean, all of that emotional language is important, because the first step of really taking care of our mental health, from my standpoint with young children, is being able to express it appropriately and giving young children the words to express that. I think the second part of my work that I've been, at least this year, I am here in California. The Department of Education has started like a working group called the Social Emotional Learning Working Group, which I am a part of. And our goal is really to take this kind of work on a macro level and be able to write certain competencies like standards, but for social emotional learning, and have school districts and schools adopt those, right? And so it's a very simplistic it sounds very simple as I say it, but it's been years of this work. So just give you a brief example of what that might look like, right? School age children, they have certain academic standards that they need to meet, and that's what teachers need to attack for that school year. This would be that, but now including some social and emotional competencies, right? And having teachers also teach those the same way that they teach math and reading and writing, right? So it'd be identifying, what you do in conflict, how you feel, how do you manage stress, and really infusing those into our education and into our curriculum. It's early in the project, but it's been something that I've really enjoyed doing this past year.
Wow, I am so thankful that I feel spoiled almost, Megan, that we get to be the recipients of something that you're creating and that you're innovating to hopefully, Wendy and Chris and my kid, they're school age and they're going to be in the education system for years to come. And to hear what is being created for their generation to grow up with is astounding. It really is. Just to even, I think most of us here are, 80s and 90s babies. And so just to kind of see what's going to be available to the future. I'm thankful for the work that you do. So thank you for that. Wendy and Chris, same question.
Well, I think there's a big expectation on everybody. Like I'm reading a book right now, Elon Musk, and it's like, even like with me, I find myself comparing myself to Elon Musk, who's a genius, and the book's incredible. But it's like, I find myself that I belong to different mastermind groups. And then I find myself like, even with the success and things that I've created, all of a sudden, like you got somebody over here, now I'm comparing myself to that person. So I think trying to use myself, and I think we are both kind of based on an authentic part. Like we try to share our stories to show that, because a lot of times, like I'm really disciplined with my exercise and my eating, but I got lots of other struggles, like when it comes to business and all kinds of other things. So trying to be authentic, like with sharing the things that we're insecure with, the things that we struggle with, and just trying to like show everybody like, hey, we're all human and it's okay. Like if we don't achieve these things, but we got to know exactly what we want and why we want them at the same point. So it's like, I think it's just trying to create the awareness, either working with us, working with therapists, working with themselves, reading books, whatever resources that is. But I mean, that's what I'm trying to do all the time. And I think,
yeah, we both are at the same time. Every day is a different challenge, right? And a different opportunity to succeed and to flourish.
We have some questions that are actually kind of being spun off of that as well. Karen, why don't we actually address some of these questions that have come in, or kind of right in talking about these anyway? I'll go ahead and toss to Ms. Karen to take some of the chat questions.
Great. So we have a couple questions. The first one is for all of you amazing panelists. Has anyone felt resistance or stigma, regarding mental health or illness when bringing these messages into your profession or workplaces?
Yes, 100% yes. As a society, I don't think we're there yet. I think we've made a lot of progress on acceptance of mental health challenges, but we're not there yet. So I think in my perspective and in my, professional experiences, there's definitely been resistance when, I notice that maybe a child does need, some outside supports, some mental health supports, and the family not understanding or being resistant. That was their first response, is a little bit of resistance. Then I do a lot of psychoeducation around whatever might be the issue. And sometimes I get resistance if I feel like maybe the family or the parents need a little extra help, and I bring that to light. That's also a place that I've run into resistance. And really, the way I approach that resistance is by always saying, I'm here to support. I'm here to help. I also don't know everything about what might be going on. So I'm also here to listen and to learn, right? Because sometimes the resistance comes in, and I've had these conversations with parents. It's like, you have no idea. And then they just break down. And then I'm like, okay. There's a lot more to the story than what maybe I'm seeing in the few hours I'm here at school with their child. Let's just say that's because that's just the world I live in.
This particular question is, how do you practice self-care? So in managing burnout and self-care, what are some of the techniques, some of the practices that you all usher into your life?
There are all these things, there's all these sort of pieces of advice that we all hear, these old things, all adagios that seem to sort of not make sense. But for example, something that really, really for me in terms of sort of burnout managing pace, because I'm such a perfectionist, I'm such a workhorse. My instinct when things don't work is to work harder, which leads right to burnout. So the thing that I keep asking myself is, so this thing, practice makes perfect, right? We've all heard that before. And that's true, but the way that I kind of look at it is practice makes permanent. So if I'm practicing the wrong thing, I'm perfecting the wrong thing. And so I kind of stop and really, really sort of think about, is working hard, is sort of banging my head against the wall and sort of trying constantly, and spending hours and hours, is that sort of the best way to internalize the practice that I'm trying to create? And that often sort of gives me pause. So I have a practice now where I know that when I'm struggling with something, I know that it's just kind of my process. And I know that I'm sort of working through what it is that I need, even though I'm not working hard. My brain and my heart are doing a lot of the work to sort of find the way. And during that time, what I do is I force myself sometimes to just rest and just stop. Because that doesn't seem like work. This seems like work, but this is also work. So I go and swim, for example, and people go, that's, you're wasting time. No, I'm not. I'm giving my brain and my body, because my brain and my body knows what it needs. So that's for me been really, really effective.
That part is huge, knowing what your body needs and listening to it. Wendy and Chris, what are some of the techniques? And I'm going to write these absolutely down because I saw them 6-pack pictures. Come on now, right? I'm about to write them down. Please give me some techniques.
Well, I think there's 4 main ones that we need to focus on. And first is going to be sleep. Actually, I'll throw 5 in there, but first is going to be sleep for sure. So getting ourselves on a sleep cycle, trying to go to bed at it's the same thing I teach everybody all the time. So go to bed at the same time every day and try to wake up. It's not always going to be perfect, but it's like, just try to make sure you're getting sleep, because that's going to be one of the things that's going to help you be more positive, feel better, have more energy to do everything else that you're doing. Make sure that you're staying hydrated. So make sure you're drinking plenty of water. Then like nutrition. So making sure you're eating nutritiously, like eating good, healthy foods that are going to serve you as far as feeling better. Movement, activity, doesn't necessarily have to be hardcore boot camp exercise. It can be, just needs to be active, just move your body, get the blood flowing. And then the 5th one I would throw in meditation. And I know for me, I can get burned out really easy too. Just like Eugene had said, like I will do the same thing. I get frustrated, I get ticked off, and I'm like, I'm going to work harder. And then it's like, before I know it, I'm a zombie and I can't do anything. So I try to utilize all these tools. And I mean, it's always work, but at the same point, like, maybe you guys will take benefit in this. I think the struggle is the best part. And I think a lot of us don't want to go through the struggle, but it's where the value in everything that we do is. I usually will meditate or do something where I just kind of close my eyes and try to stop the thinking for a minute, and then just give myself the space to kind of just know why I'm doing everything. And it's like realizing like it's not the end destination that's important, because like, and especially when you're an achiever, depending on where you're at, but it's like, that doesn't create happiness. I think we always think like, hey, if we get here, will I lose this weight? Because it's never about the weight loss. Like most everybody's always coming to us for weight loss. I've never worked with a person in 20 years that it's about the weight loss. It's about that transformation inside.
That is so good. I started saying something differently when I would notice that someone visibly was making some changes. And because again, just living in LA, obviously you can't help but kind of fall into the habit of some superficial comment or something like that. But what was more important to me, just because I've had a tumultuous health journey, what was important to me was how they were feeling. And so instead of recognizing, which it feels good to be recognized for the work that you've done physically, for sure. And but my more important question that I had for them was really, how do you feel? Because you can look great. You can look whatever standard of great is for you. You can look a certain way, but how do you feel? And so that then started to become more of what I would mention if I saw a drastic transformation within someone, is how do you feel, both physically, mentally, spiritually, how do you actually feel? So thank you for that. Thank you all so, so much for your time today. Thank you for, again, what you do in your communities, wherever you are, what you do for the greater good of, while you build up humans we build up each other, the goal is that we will all live in harmony a little bit better than we are maybe the day before. And so thank you for the work that you're doing. Before we officially close out, we have a couple of things that Kara's going to cover, just in terms of how to stay connected to the state of events, and of course, how to get in touch with any of our speakers today.
Oh my gosh, if I could just keep going, I would. Thank you so much, you guys. So as we wrap up today, I just want to talk about just the little things that you guys can be to continue to connect with us. For everyone attending, this is our social media platforms. And of course, Karen will be putting the link to our link tree. And in our link tree, you'll be able to subscribe to our newsletter as well. And we will be putting out a very exciting thing soon about our membership. So basically, if you want to be part of our community, basically our community is just people supporting each other in this crazy events world. It will help you with your business, health and wellness, like we talked about today, and so much more. So just subscribe to our newsletter and we'll give you more information about it. If you do subscribe to our newsletter, you get a free 30-minute consultation with one of our TISO partners. So if you have anything that you are thinking about with your business, with me, I'm starting my own business as well. So TISO has been such a great support as I start my entrepreneurship journey.
Definitely encourage everyone to get signed up. There's lots of good things coming. So encourage you to stay connected.
Thank you all so much for joining today. Be well, be blessed, and enjoy the soon coming summer.
You've been listening to The State of Events, where event professionals connect. For more episodes, you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and Podbean. To engage with us on social media, look for @TISO Community. That's @TSOE Community. You can also visit our Facebook page, The State of Events. Make sure you stay connected by joining our newsletter. And lastly, we would love to hear from you. If you have topic suggestions, if you want to be a guest on the show, send us an email to inquiries@thestateofevents.com. That's inquiries@thestateofevents.com.